are happier and healthier because of it. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the 125 years of outstanding service and community involvement of Wesley Enhanced Living, a Philadelphia, Bucks County, and Montgomery County faith-based institution providing wonderful service to my district. For more than a century, the professional, dedicated staff at Wesley has provided a crucial service to seniors around the Delaware Valley. Following their guiding values of grace, honor, and integrity, Wesley has strived to serve the aging population and better their golden years. Beyond the task of caring for its residents, the leadership at Wesley Enhanced Living has been open and forthcoming towards new and innovative ways to help seniors across the country. By working in unison with leaders in the field, we've been able to find better ways to represent the seniors in my district and serve the needs of those who care for them each day. I wish the best for Wesley Enhanced Living, and I hope that their commitment to our community continues for another 125 years. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Yesterday was World AIDS Day, and before I left my home district this morning, I gathered with longtime friends and fighters against the surge and the scourge of HIV/AIDS. Although we have come a long way and made a great difference, 50,000 people are affected each year by HIV/AIDS. This is the 32nd year of the establishment or the announcement of the epidemic of HIV/AIDS, and today some 34 million plus around the world live with HIV/AIDS. 9.5 minutes in this country, someone is infected with AIDS. And so I stand here in salute of the Thomas Street Clinic and the AIDS Foundation, one, because of the health care that Thomas Street Clinic gives, and to be able to thank them for the litany and devotional that they provided for us, and to the AIDS Foundation, of course, to thank them for letting people live with AIDS and to have a comfort of those who will stand with them. But I also am wearing another button today, and that is to salute those and to embrace those who are for the Fast for Families. We must have comprehensive immigration reform, and I stand with them until we pass to save lives as well. I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revising semi-remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Eden Prairie Eagles for winning this year's Minnesota High School Football Championship. It was a three-peat, Mr. Speaker. With this weekend's victory, the Eagles solidified a state record 9th high school championship and became the first large enrollment school to win 3 consecutive titles. Going undefeated the entire season, the road to the state title was nothing short of excellence, and the Eagles' victory was earned through unwavering hard work. Mr. Speaker, the members of this year's team exemplify what it means to be student athletes, and they've shown incredible determination, character, and teamwork. It's no wonder that nearly 20,000 Minnesotans came out to watch the championship game. Congratulations to the entire team, including coach and Eden Prairie High School Athletic Director Mike Grant. This year's success is a tribute to their high level of commitment, and one that I'm sure will continue to display not only on the field, but in all aspects of their years to come. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first thank our leader, Nancy Pelosi, for her dedication and unwavering support to fight AIDS since arriving to the United States Congress 25 years ago. This morning, I had the honor of joining President Obama, Secretary Kerry, Secretary Sebelius, and many advocates at the White House to mark World AIDS Day. It was a time for remembering the friends and loved ones who we have lost. Also a reminder of the extraordinary progress that we have made, but also a reminder that we cannot stop now. In the United States Congress, few issues have transcended partisan gridlock like the fight against AIDS. And I want to just salute our Chairman Ed Royce and also our Ranking Member Elliot Engel for their unwavering commitment to keep this a bipartisan issue. Thank you. In the last 2 weeks alone, we have passed the HIV Organ Policy Equity Act and the PEPFAR Stewardship and Oversight Act, which President Obama signed into law this afternoon. So many played a major role in the creation of PEPFAR and the Global Fund, and I am so proud of the leadership from the Congressional Black Caucus in supporting PEPFAR and the Minority AIDS Initiative and the National Strategy on HIV and AIDS. Now's the time to recommit ourselves to an AIDS-free generation.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as co-chair of the Ukrainian caucus here in the House, I rise today to condemn the violence currently igniting in Ukraine at the hands of Ukraine's top government officials. Their targets are peaceful protesters and dozens of journalists who have been harmed. Shouldn't President Yanukovych and the Ukrainian government be working hard to encourage and ensure a more open society rather than repressing their own citizenry? Shouldn't they be building a society in which Ukrainians can assemble and freely voice concerns regarding the future of their country? Hundreds of thousands of demonstrators, some have estimated over 1 million people, have taken to the streets in Kiev this past week out of frustration at their government's abandonment of a European Union association agreement. As protests escalated through this weekend, journalists and demonstrators were met with a violent police crackdown. Many were brutally beaten and burned by tear gas. For many years now, Ukrainians have called for and continue to desire a government and country that embrace democracy, liberty, and respects human rights. Those citizens in the streets and all Ukrainians deserve the opportunity to peacefully demonstrate. They should not fear government retaliation. Mr. Speaker, in closing, let me say that I continue to support the Ukrainian people's European aspirations and their demands for democratic reform. Let the people of Ukraine move forward and face west and east and north and south with no fear of reprisal. I yield back my remaining time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, climate scientists like Dr. Rob Dunbar at Stanford are warning us if we continue down this path of inaction, global sea levels will rise on the average anywhere from 1 to 7 feet by the end of this century. Let's just take a 4-foot rise in global sea level, for example. That would devastate coastal communities and jeopardize, in my state, hundreds of thousands of Californians' properties, causing billions of dollars worth of damage. As someone who represents a coastal port, this rise in sea level will cause us tremendous amount of infrastructure needs. It's our responsibility to take action now to help cut greenhouse gas emissions so that we can start to curb some of the deepest harm caused by rising sea levels. If we do not act, we're turning our back on every coastal community, not only in California, but on this entire planet. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nevada seek recognition?
For 1 minute to address the House.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to congratulate the Yerington Lions football team on their 42-19 win over Mountain View Christian for the Division III Nevada State title. They were undefeated throughout the season, finishing 11-0. So this just wasn't one title game. It was a year of proving that they are really the best. And it's not just any state title for this school. This is the first state title since 1981. And they have the support of everyone in town. The whole community was out for the game wearing their team colors of purple and white. Interesting to note, on average, the Yerington Lions gave up less than 5.6 points per game average. That's lower than Congress's approval rating. That's pretty impressive, don't you think? Yerington is an important part of my 51,000 square mile district. So I want to say congratulations to the students, congratulations to Coach Cody Neville, and congratulations to Yerington. You make Nevada proud.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Yesterday in my district and very near to my home, there was a horrific derailment on the Metro-North Railroad, which cost the lives of 4 people and injuring another 63. My heart goes out to the victims, the people who died, the people who were injured, and their families as well. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating, and hopefully very soon we will know exactly what happened and have their recommendations as well. Right now, preliminary accounts say that the train was going 83 miles an hour in a 70-mile-an-hour zone that was soon, by a curve, going down to what should have been a 30-mile-an-hour zone. So again, I hope that when the NTSB comes out with recommendations for safety on our rail in the United States, that the Congress will act accordingly and perhaps pass legislation to make our trains safer. In the meantime, again, my heart and our hearts go out to all the victims of this horrific tragedy. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Asked to address the House for 1 minute and then to revise the House.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to welcome to the House of Representatives these 5 selfless individuals, courageous reformers who have made a tremendous sacrifice to raise awareness for the need of immigration reform. They are truly deserving not only of our applause, but also of our admiration. After fasting for over 3 weeks, these committed reformers have successfully drawn attention to the pressing need to pass immigration reform. As members of Congress, we cannot ignore the steadfast devotion that these advocates through further inaction. Along with the majority of this country and the majority of the House of Representatives, these tremendous leaders know we need comprehensive immigration reform now. Unfortunately, the House leadership continues to irresponsibly block common-sense bipartisan reform by refusing to let the full House vote. Mr. Speaker, these bold leaders deserve more than applause. They deserve a vote, and they deserve it now. I yield back the balance of my time.
The Chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Culberson of Texas for today and the balance of the week, Mrs. McMorris Rogers of Washington for today and the balance of the week.
Without objection, the requests are granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2013, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I think there's been a lot of things going on in the world in the last few weeks, and a lot here domestically, things that have not been going well on the administration's agenda. Those have been well documented, and not the reason that I rise tonight. But what is the purpose for my rising is the issue that seems to want to distract from issues at home, and that is a very disturbing development with Iran and the administration's agreement that has been announced. These are disturbing for many reasons, and tonight we rise, and I rise bipartisanly tonight to talk about this because I want the people of Israel and I want the American people who are great friends of Israel to be assured that there are plenty of members of Congress committed to this alliance, and I am proud to be one of them. And also join with my friend Mr. Snyder from Illinois. I'm excited to be a part of this and discuss for what will be a discussion on what we believe are the values that we share together. I would go ahead and yield for a brief opening here before we get started, Mr. Snyder, as we go forward this night.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you, to join you in this discussion. The world has watched anxiously as the P5+1 had a series of negotiations that culminated 2 weeks ago in an interim agreement. And as we join here tonight to talk about some of the issues in this agreement, what we will be looking for to ensure that whatever happens, Iran is not allowed to achieve nuclear capability, and that our allies in the region, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, and others, are protected from the prospect of a nuclear Iran. And I yield back.
I agree, and I appreciate the gentleman so much. I believe that it is certain in our foreign policy, is as much as anything, America needs to speak from a position of strength that we have, that we should not deny our position of strength and our power to enforce what we believe are standards that need to be looked at across the world. And tonight, I want to bring that attention to the floor of the House of Representatives and also to the nation. My dedication to the U.S.-Israel alliance brings me to the floor tonight with an urgent message for our President. Don't fall for Iran's public relations campaign. In the words of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu during his recent speech before the UN, newly elected Iranian President Hassan Rouhani thinks he can have his yellow cake and eat it too. President Rouhani is orchestrating an unprecedented charm offensive to reduce sanctions on his country. Over the last 5 months, this is amazing, his campaign has included by tweeting Happy Rosh Hashanah to Jews across the globe celebrating their new year, condemning the use of chemical weapons in Syria after the August 21st attacks, making diplomatic overtures to President Obama through personal letters. Mr. President, tell Rouhani that mere words won't ultimately improve relations between the U.S. and Iran. Most recently, 2 rounds of nuclear negotiations have occurred. A truly disturbing deal between the West and Iran materialized, which puts Israel in a very difficult position. Much like negotiations with North Korea over its nuclear program, the U.S. is being duped. The deal allows Iran to maintain its nuclear program while the U.S. sanctions are lifted for 6 months. This deal benefits no one but Iran. There are bipartisan measures currently in the House and Senate to maintain sanctions and to continue to hold Iran accountable for its actions. Mr. President, I ask you carefully review President Rouhani's record before moving further with more sanctions relief. To really understand President Rouhani's intentions, let's look beyond his words to his actions. On September 19th, an op-ed by the President Rouhani was published in the Washington Post. In the piece, Rouhani spoke against glorifying brute force and in favor of ending unhealthy rivalries that drive nations apart. 48 hours later, President Rouhani presided over the Iranian military parade showcasing over 30 missiles, all with the capability of striking Israel. During his speech, he said, in the past 200 years, Iran has never attacked another country. It gets better. Of course Iran doesn't have to attack because its proxy, Hezbollah, carries out its foreign policy. Hezbollah has continuously attacked Israel over the decades and is instrumental in fighting the National Coalition of Syrian Revolution and Opposition Forces. The NCSRO is a rebel group which the U.S. recognizes as a legitimate representative of the Syrian people. Let us not forget Iran's intrusion on U.S. soil. The Iranian hostage crisis of 1979 began with an attack on and subsequent occupation of the U.S. Embassy. 52 Americans were held hostage for 444 days. The attack had the support of Iran's then leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. The attack was clear violation of international diplomatic protocol. President Rouhani has made several claims that Iran's nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. He says Iran's only desire is to diversify its energy production capability. Yet Iran has not only refused to reverse course on enriching uranium, but has 1,000 new generation centrifuges that enrich uranium faster and are more durable than previous versions. As we say down in Georgia, a slap on the jaw and a kiss on the cheek don't send the same message. Recently, freshman members of the Foreign Affairs Committee sent a bipartisan letter to President Obama telling him to be vigilant in his diplomatic actions with Rouhani. Any negotiation with the Iranian regime should not only come after Iran has stopped enriching uranium and neutralizes the quantity it currently possesses. Congress has let it be known with the passage of the Nuclear Iran Prevention Act this summer in the House. Congress and the American people do not trust the Iranian regime. The White House needs to sign the latest set of sanctions. These sanctions go further than previous by targeting the profiteering of black market goods. Sanctions target regime members who are guilty of human rights violations. Congress is sending the message that not only do we highly discourage the development of nuclear weapons by the regime, but detest how select citizens are subject to torture and restrictions on speech and political persecution. It is amazing what is going on right now. And the President needs to realize that the Middle East is not a chessboard, and we shouldn't play games with Iran. This is a time to stand up and be decisive. We must stand with Israel and other rational actors in the region and not capitulate on the development of a nuclear Iran. With that, I want to share back with and yield to my friend as we share back and forth tonight on different aspects as we go forward.
Great. Thank you. And I want to again thank Representative Collins for holding this important conversation tonight to talk about the dangers and long-term implications of a nuclear deal with Iran. I think it's both timely and necessary that Congress continue this conversation and push hard to convince the Senate that further action is required to help prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Personally, I remain most skeptical that the Iranian regime has the ability or willingness to live up to the tenets and the terms of the Geneva Agreement reached with the P5+1. We have worked diligently over the years, over a decade, to maintain sanctions regime, a robust sanctions regime that brought Iran to the negotiating table. But it was not to come to the table that the sanctions were put in place. These sanctions were put in place to ensure or achieve the end of Iran's nuclear program, to ensure that Iran is not a nuclear-capable country. In July, as was mentioned, this body passed by a vote of 400 to 20 the most sweeping sanctions to date in order to address the ongoing threat of a nuclear Iran. That legislation must be taken up in the Senate to hold Iran accountable, to ensure that Iran fully understands the implications of not completing a deal in 6 months that will eliminate its nuclear threat. However, there are several points of the deal reached with Iran that are particularly worrisome. First, this interim agreement cannot be allowed to become the permanent agreement. The so-called Joint Plan of Action is fraught with dangers, including allowing Iran to continue enrichment at the 5% level, allowing Iran to continue construction at the Iraq plutonium reactor, which has no purpose other than for military uses, allowing the ongoing enhancement of Iran's technical capabilities. This agreement does not address Iran's ongoing program, its long-term activities. It doesn't require Iran to fully disclose all of its activities. And this agreement does not address any covert sites which are not yet discovered or disclosed by Iran. This deal, as I said, is fraught with dangers, and our purpose in Congress in the United States and with our allies must be to try to navigate the Joint Plan of Action to a permanent agreement that will ultimately freeze Iran's activities, roll them back and require Iran to dismantle Natanz, Fordo, Iraq, and other facilities, and ultimately and most importantly, permanently block and permanently close any path Iran has to a nuclear capability. That includes no enrichment, no plutonium reactor, full transparency, full disclosure, unlimited and unfettered inspections. With that, I'll yield back to Mr. Collins.
Well, I appreciate my colleague. You know, you brought up a great point there, and I want to continue to go into the history here because I don't want individuals who may be watching tonight or watching this later to simply look at this in a vacuum as saying that we're just disagreeing with a policy and there was a diplomatic outreach that was given and we're not giving it an opportunity. I think, and from where I'm from, and I know you are as well, the past is prologue to what happens now. And I think what we've got to understand is the regime has not inherently changed. The regime in Iran still has just at core issues with the West and especially with Israel. And I think you hit it perfectly, and before I continue, you brought it up again. The idea of these negotiations were not to find a placated middle. The desire is to find an end to the Iranian nuclear regime because we just don't trust them.
Right.
And I think that's the inherent problem. You know, let's look at it here from a perspective. President Rouhani was recently afforded a great opportunity to show a stark contrast between himself and the former Iranian president, Mohammad Ahmadinejad. Mr. Rouhani was asked whether he believed the Holocaust was a myth. Rouhani answered, "I am not a historian, I'm a politician." Netanyahu responded, "It doesn't take a historian to recognize the existence of the Holocaust. It just requires being a human being." Rouhani is captive to the religious zealots in his country and the policies of the supreme ruler, Ayatollah Khomeini. Rouhani is so beholden to the regime's ideology that when the White House offered the opportunity for the newly elected Iranian president to shake hands with our president, Rouhani's staff declined because of the fear of how it would be perceived in Iran. Now think about that a second. If a handshake can be turned into political gangrene for the Iranian president, how can we believe that any of Iran's diplomatic overtures will result in any real change? I don't want the U.S. to go down the same path with Iran that it did with North Korea. In 2005, it was then seen as a landmark deal. North Korea agreed to abandon its nuclear weapons program in return for economic, security, and energy benefits. 12 months later, the North Korea tested its first nuclear weapon. Let's not forget the immortal precept, fool me once, let's not be fooled twice. I'd like to take time to highlight a few points from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech before the UN. This speech occurred nearly a week after Rouhani spoke before the international body. But before in doing so, I want to yield back to my friend from Illinois as well. And just as we continue this conversation, again, history matters. And what has gone on in the past, I believe, is very crucial into understanding why many of us on the Hill bipartisanly do not trust the Iranian regime. And I yield to my friend.
Thank you. And I think it's critical to emphasize the bipartisan aspect of the support in Congress for a strong sanctions regime and the security and protection of our allies, in particular Israel. As my colleague mentioned, in October, I, with Luke Messer, authored a letter to the President calling on him to push forward with sanctions. There were 78 members of a freshman class who signed on to that letter, Republican and Democrat, shoulder to shoulder, standing together, saying we must be strong. Again, this can't be, the interim agreement cannot move to anything near what is a permanent agreement. More importantly, it cannot lead to the collapse of the sanctions regime. We've worked too hard and come too far to let that happen. In my opinion, I think we need to ensure that the architecture of the sanctions are reinforced, are broadened, are deepened, and hardened so that 6 months from now, if Iran fails to live up to its commitments and the consequences are sufficiently severe, Iran understands that the likelihood of further action, all actions on the table, including a credible military threat, remain, so that ultimately Iran understands this is the moment, this is the time to abandon their nuclear aspirations. This is why the sanctions are put in place. This is why it's critical for the Senate to pass the bill we passed in July and make sure Iran understands that not adhering to the agreement, not abandoning its nuclear program will have dire consequences in 6 months. And with that, I yield back.
Well, I appreciate the gentleman. And again, it is a matter of now. This has been going on for a while. This is not built up over just the last couple of weeks that we've discovered this problem. This has been a problem with Iran for, going on the years now that they've been building this program and really bunkering this program now, which I think when your call for transparency really highlights the need that it is amazing now that all of a sudden they want to be open, but yet they only want to be open in a way that they control, but they do want the money. I mean, I think it goes back to, if we can sort of go back here to the American film, show me the money. Well, you show me money, you show me Iran's intention at this point, because they want the money that has been held up by sanctions. Why? Because the sanctions have worked. This administration needs to understand the sanctions have worked. They have worked in a way that we have not seen before. It is not time to abandon those. But as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I wanted to take Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech. And if you've not had a chance to hear it, I know my colleague has. Many times we can talk about problems, but we don't offer solutions. And I think what he did is not only highlight the problems with this administration in Iran, but also gave some solutions as well. So I want to look at it for just a moment. Netanyahu started his speech discussing the rich history of the Jewish and Persian nations share. For those who remember, in my case, a Sunday school class, over 2,000 years ago, the Babylonian Empire released the captive Jews to develop a homeland of their own. This historic friendship lasted until a radical regime came to power in Iran in 1979. Netanyahu quickly pointed out how unlikely it is that Rouhani is truly a moderate. Rouhani was one of 6 candidates selected by the regime to run for office. That's 6 out of 700 candidates who desired to run. I think there's a little bit of picking going on here. Rouhani led the Iranian version of the CIA and the NSA. During his time leading Iran's Supreme National Security Council, 85 people were murdered at a Jewish community center in Argentina by Iranian henchmen. Iran has its fingerprints on the bombing of the Khobar Towers in Saudi Arabia that killed 19 American soldiers. Rouhani was the chief nuclear negotiator between 2003 and 2005. This moderate Iranian developed a strategy encouraging diplomatic engagement, but never changed its approach in increasing its nuclear proliferation capabilities. Netanyahu cites a book Rouhani wrote in 2011 in which he wrote, "While we were talking to the Europeans in Tehran, we were installing equipment in Isfahan." Isn't that a telling thought right there? Rouhani touts his negotiation skills by saying, by creating a calm environment, we were able to complete the work in Isfahan. Is Isfahan facility where the uranium ore called yellowcake is converted into an enrichable form. Since 2002, Iran has built 2 secret facilities to further its nuclear ambitions. Several years later, it was caught building an uranium enrichment station underground. If Iran is only seeking peaceful nuclear energy, why is it building structures in a clandestine way? Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the obvious answer there is clear. Netanyahu also asked why Iran is trying to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles, if not to further its nuclear ambitions. ICBMs are purposefully designed to be a transportation vehicle for a nuclear weapon. As Netanyahu pointed out, you don't build ICBMs to carry TNT thousands of miles away. The Prime Minister is clearly troubled in light of the U.S. history with North Korea. Just like North Korea before it, Iran professes to seemingly peaceful intentions. It talks the talk of nonproliferation while seeking to ease sanctions and buy more time for its nuclear program. He understands that America has been similarly negotiating table and blinked. Instead of offering a more mere rhetoric or hollow gestures as the Iranian president has done, Netanyahu offers a solution. He lays out steps the Iranian regime can make to show a willingness to negotiate and possibly have sanctions lifted. Netanyahu proposes 4 steps for Iran, some that we need to look at as well. Number 1, ending all uranium enrichment. Number 2, removing its inventory of enriched uranium, similar to Syria's handing over of its chemical weapons, dismantling its infrastructure for nuclear breakout capability, and number 4, stopping all work at a heavy water reactor in Iraq aimed at production of plutonium. These steps would cease Iran's nuclear weapons program and eliminate its ability to conduct a nuclear strike. Netanyahu does not just leave the ball, though, in Iran's court, and this is something to look at. It does take both parties. And he says this. He says the international community should, for assistance to ensure Iranians' compliance, he laid out a 3-point strategy. First, keep up the sanctions. If Iran advances its nuclear weapons program during negotiations, strengthen the sanctions. That's sort of the way it works. I know, when I need something and I get out of line, you get pulled back in. You don't get more freedom just by saying you're going to do something more. I know your children and my children alike, in dealing with that as you look ahead, there are more restrictions if you don't do something right. That's a great first step. Second, don't agree to a partial deal. A partial deal would lift sanctions that have taken years to put in place in exchange for cosmetic concessions that will take only weeks for Iran to reverse. And third, lift the sanctions only when Iran fully dismantles its nuclear program. Netanyahu concluded his speech in somewhat a conciliatory tone. He says, I am prepared to make a historic compromise for genuine and enduring peace, but I will never compromise on the security of my people and of my country, the one and only Jewish state. Considering Israel's hostile neighbors, I understand the Prime Minister's vigilant tone. The U.S. has strongly supported Israel's resolve in the past, and I hope this administration will not relent. Israel has the most to lose if Iran gets the bomb. And that's something we can't ever forget. With that, I yield back to my friend.
Thank you again. And you hit on a crucial point, is for Israel, a nuclear Iran is an existential threat. Yes. It is life and death at the front lines. But also, as you touched on, Israel has no greater friend than the United States. And that relationship is a strategic relationship for both parties. We have no better ally. Israel is the only stable, democratic country in the region. Israel is reliable. Israel is our friend, and we will always remember that. I think it's also important to understand the breadth and scope of the Iranian program. As you touched on, Iran is seeking to control the nuclear fuel cycle, from mining to yellowcake to enrichment to ultimately weapons grade. And that is a program that is spread throughout the country, from Isfahan to Natanz and Fordo, and ultimately in the weaponization area at Parchin. That's the second piece, is weaponization. It's one thing to control the fuel cycle. It's another thing to turn that into a nuclear weapon. Iran is working aggressively to do that, and this deal does not address their weaponization programs. And finally, once you control the fuel cycle, once you're able to have a weapon, it's delivery. And Iran, with their intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, is working to develop a capability to deliver such a weapon of mass destruction, not just in its region, but throughout the world. Iran for Israel is an existential threat. But Iran for the region and Iran for the world is as extreme a threat as it is for Israel. We must prevent a nuclear Iran, not just because Israel is our ally, but because a nuclear Iran is a threat to the whole region, a threat to nuclear destabilization, a nuclear arms race among other countries in the region, and that's what we're focused on. That's why it's so critical that this moment, as Iran is months away from the capability of having a nuclear weapon, we focus aggressively on closing the pathways, freezing, reversing and dismantling, and ultimately permanently blocking any pathway Iran has for a nuclear weapon. And with that, I'll yield back to my friend from Georgia.
Well, I think the gentleman, and one of the things that amazed me, and is what you just said there, is that we are so close and getting closer every day for their capability to be, for lack of a better term, perfected. And they've been working at it, they've been hiding it, they've been doing those things. And now to come at this last moment and really give an infusion of cash, which is what they're going to be getting, to the billions of dollar tune, and to continue to allow the enrichment process to continue, is just really disturbing here. I'm not seeing, as I said earlier, the end game, except that, you know, from my perspective, there was the old philosophy, there was the old foreign policy of one of my party's heroes, and one that I believe served this country well, and it was Ronald Reagan when he said the foreign policy is we win, you lose. And I think at this point what's concerning me is in this deal, we lose, they win, and the rest of the world is put in jeopardy. And you made a great statement. Not only is Israel and Iran an existential threat to Israel, I'm often heard, why do we worry about Iran? You know, that's another country. Why do we need to get involved? Because it is a direct and immediate threat to the U.S. as well. We have troops within missile range. We have troops that are in international waters that could be literally affected by the military force in Iran. I think those are issues that we've got to address as we move forward. It's not something that we can just put in its little corner. Iran, in some ways, is much different than North Korea with their assets and with their capabilities, and we can't deny where they are in the world. And I think that's the concern that I have with this administration. That's why that we're here tonight talking about this, and I want to discuss some more about this, but I will yield back to my friend.
Thank you. And as you said, the question, why do we care about Iran? It's actually a question I don't hear that often in my district, because I think a lot of the people in my community understand that when someone makes a threat to annihilate another country, you listen to the threat. When we were in Israel, 37 members, Democratic members, traveled to Israel in August, followed by a comparable-sized group of Republican members. On our trip, we had a chance to hear from a former chief of intelligence, Amos Yadlin. And he made the statement that the only existential threat to Israel is the marriage of ideology of destruction with nuclear capability. We face that threat now. That's why we're here having this conversation. That's why over the last decade we have worked diligently to create the architecture of a sanctions regime that did indeed bring Iran to the negotiating table. This joint agreement, interim agreement, keeps the sanctions regime in place. But over the next 6 months, it's our responsibility, the United States Congress, our allies, to make sure that that sanctions regime not only stays in place, but stays robust and becomes stronger so that, again, Iran understands the challenges. I've said many times that history is going to judge us with one question on Iran. Did we prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon? This moment in history faces us at this moment in time. This agreement must not be allowed to be permanent. The United States and our allies must ensure that Iran does not further move down the path to nuclear capability. Iran is estimated to be months, at most a year away from a nuclear weapon. The next 6 months, if we're going to enforce this agreement, must make sure that Iran doesn't get any closer. Not one moment, not 1 month, not 1 inch. This agreement has to be put in place in such a way that we can guarantee Iran is not moving forward. What do some of those actions require from us? What I hope to do in the Foreign Affairs Committee, together with my Republican colleagues, is try to create a specific understanding of the timetables for implementation. The joint agreement doesn't lay that out. I want to know what are the milestones, what are the expectations and deliverables that Iran must arrive at each milestone. What's the proof we're going to require of Iran to demonstrate that they've achieved the specifications of the agreement at the specified time? And most importantly, what are the consequences if Iran doesn't achieve its milestones, if Iran uses this agreement to even start or try to delay? We need to make sure we stay vigilant, we stay diligent to ensure that Iran can't move forward on its aspirations for a nuclear weapon. And with that, I yield back to my colleague.
Well, you're exactly correct in how we move forward. Again, when you just put aspirational goals out there, you're going to get aspirational results sometimes, and that means nothing. And I think that's really where I see this agreement right now. But I want to take, again, I believe that not only do you have the what and the reasons, but there's also sort of the why factor. And I've talked about that a lot from both sides out. Many times we may not talk about the why a lot, but I want to talk just for a moment and some things we're doing as well, but about Israel and our relationships, just from a why perspective, why this matters so much and the history that we have that for some who may be listening. Because the U.S. and Israeli relationship really goes back to after World War II. And it has become apparent to the international community the Jews needed a homeland of their own, and in 1948, President Harry Truman recognized the State of Israel. During the Cold War, Israel was a key ally in stopping the spread of communism in the Arab world. The U.S. and Israel had a joint strategic interest in defeating aggressors in the Middle East, seeking to influence their neighbors and disrupt the status quo, especially if they had Moscow's backing. President John F. Kennedy told Israeli Foreign Minister Golda Meir, "The United States has a special relationship with Israel in the Middle East, really comparable only to what it has with Britain over a wide range of world affairs." Since that bonding experience, the U.S. and Israel have approached strategy as a region as a team. As a team. Over the 5 major Arab-Israeli military conflicts that have occurred over the decades, the one that highlights the U.S.-Israeli union the most is the Yom Kippur War. In this conflict, Israel was fighting the usual suspects, Egypt to the southeast along the Sinai Peninsula and Syria to the north along the Golan Heights. This joint Arab initiative garnered the military support of Jordan and Iraq, while Egyptians received military hardware from the Soviet Union. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack on October 6, 1973, which was Israel's most holy day, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The war inflicted heavy initial losses on Israel's army and our Air Force, and by October 8th, Israel's military prowess was in serious jeopardy. A quick call was made to Washington. The operation to resupply Israel began, codenamed Operation Nickelgrass. By the end of Nickelgrass, the U.S. had shipped 22,395 tons of material to Israel. Israel received between 34 and 40 fighter bombers, 46 attack airplanes, 12 C-130 cargo planes, 8 helicopters, 200 tanks, and tons more of missiles and artillery pieces. It was one of the largest airlifts in U.S. history. The total cost of the military hardware delivered is estimated to be $4.14 billion. The airlift was a major shift in U.S.-Israeli relations. It brought about a greater U.S. involvement in Middle East affairs, and after the Yom Kippur War, the United States quadrupled its foreign aid to Israel and replaced France as Israel's largest arms supplier. The doctrine of maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge over its Arab neighbors is said to have originated from this war. And this is where you and I, my colleague, stepped in. I find this common sense doctrine very important and aim to strengthen it with the legislation that we introduced, the Israeli QME Enhancement Act. My bill requires the President to report to Congress every 2 years the status of military sales to Middle Eastern countries other than Israel. H.R. 1992 ensures Congress is able to maintain its oversight of weapon sales in the region. Furthermore, the legislation expands the scope of QME to bring to attention cyber and asymmetric warfare, something QME doesn't currently cover. During the Yom Kippur War, Israel was in need of conventional weapons. In the 21st century, war has been increasingly fought in cyberspace. Large conventional armies are less likely to be mobilized, and countries are under siege from foreign terrorists, as we saw in Kenya. Israel has stood out as the only country in the Middle East that promotes democratic, free market principles. Much like the U.S., Israel has an independent judicial system that protects the rights of individuals. Israel is governed by the rule of law and safeguards the freedoms of speech, press, and religion. As the U.S. has attempted to encourage Arab nations to espouse the tenets of a transparent society, they need to look no further than their democratic neighbor. And I want to pause right there and again yield to my friend as we continue this conversation and move forward on why this matters and bringing up these ideas of a relationship that is deeply rooted in history and of mutual sharing and not one going really seemingly behind the back of the other.
So you talk about the relationship, and as you noted, Harry S. Truman was the first to recognize the new state of Israel in 1948, after the British left the mandate. Immediately upon its declaration of independence, Israel was attacked by 5 nations. Throughout its history, Israel has faced hostility from its neighbors throughout the region. Since 1973 in the Yom Kippur War, and as a 12-year-old boy, I remember vividly coming out of synagogue that day, sitting in the back seat of my parents' car, listening to the radio, and not knowing if Israel was going to survive. It was an existential threat. The United States and Israel have had an unbreakable relationship that continues to be, to this very day, an unbreakable, important, critically important relationship. Right now, the relationship between the United States and Israel has never been better, across a whole variety of aspects. Sharing of intelligence, sharing of military expertise. The United States has helped and jointly developed with Israel David Sling, the Arrow system, and most recently helped fund the Iron Dome, which proved to be a game changer in Israel's war in Gaza exactly a year ago this month. In that war, you'll recall, rockets rained down on southern Israel from Gaza. Yet the Iron Dome system was able to intercept virtually all of those rockets, allowing Israel to avoid having to invade Gaza by land and achieving its goals, saving countless lives on both sides of the border. It's the U.S.-Israel relationship that allows the development of such systems as Iron Dome and others. But I'm also proud that we were able to work together, and I thank you for your support, for the Israel Qualitative Military Edge Enhancement Act. What used to take 4 years of review at a time when changes in military capabilities are accelerating at an unprecedented pace, this act reduces to 2 years. And as you said, what used to be focused on strictly conventional weaponry understands that the current conflicts are taking place as much as in cyberspace, as airspace and ground. It's critical that Israel maintain its critical advantage, its qualitative military edge in all aspects of that. And I was particularly proud that the Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously voted that bill to come to the floor, and I hope we'll take it up here shortly as well. But the relationship between the United States and Israel is far more than military and security. We share values. We share understanding in science, developments of new medical technologies, medicines, capabilities, developments in agriculture. The relationship between the United States and Israel is so strong because we share so much. And we understand that even on the security level, as much as Israel relies on the United States has benefited from Israel's security measures as well. One must think no further than the Iraq War and go back to 1981 when Israel, against world condemnation, attacked the nuclear reactor at Osirak. And it can only think what would have happened in 1991 or in 2003 when the United States had their own conflict with Iraq if Iraq had had nuclear weapons. The U.S.-Israel relationship is critical. It has been that way for the 65 years of Israel's existence. It's been incredibly important since 1973. We wouldn't have the Camp David Accords of 1979 and the peace between Israel and Egypt if not for the U.S. engagement. We wouldn't have the peace between Israel and Jordan if not for the work of the U.S. administrations. And it's critical as we stand here fighting so hard for American security, fighting so hard to prevent a nuclear Iran that we understand that the relationship, the mutual relationship between the United States and Israel is a critical component of all of that. And with that, I yield back.
And I think, gentlemen, you've hit on it, and that is going back to this partnership. And I think that's the best way to describe the partnership between the U.S. and Israel. In so many ways, the values that we share that you spoke of, and many things that really have come about out of our relationship over the years to not only benefit each country but the world around. You know, most recently, Israel has been instrumental in assisting the U.S. in the global war on terrorism. Since 9/11, U.S. and Israel have formed a strategic partnership to face a new and challenging world. The two nations are currently partners ranging from terrorism, proliferation, spread of radical Islamic theology, narcotics, counterfeiting, weapons smuggling, and cyber warfare. There's cooperation on a wide range of intelligence sharing programs that monitor terrorist and nation-state activities in the Middle East. Since 9/11, the U.S. and Israel have strengthened their homeland security partnership, and the two nations have worked collectively on aviation, border and port, and mall and cyber security. This information intelligence sharing improves the security of both nations. Israel has even provided tactical assistance in protecting U.S. troops as they fight terrorist organizations. Currently carried in soldiers' first aid kit is the Israeli bandage, which acts as an immediate cauterizing agent upon contact. As someone who served in Iraq and as part of our Air Force and worked with our Army and others, this is something that I've seen save lives. It is, again, a bonding between our two countries. The Israeli developed the joint helmet mounting cueing system used by the U.S. Air Force and Navy and several aircraft. It allows pilots to aim sensors and weapons wherever the pilot is looking. An Israeli manufacturer specialized in ad armor has provided protection for U.S. armored vehicles currently being used in Afghanistan. The armor combats against rocket-propelled grenade attacks. Several U.S. tactical ballistic missile systems use subcomponents developed and tested in Israel. These subcomponents are used in the Patriot missile. Another Israeli invention saving American soldiers' lives is radio frequency device that detects IEDs. As someone who saw the horror of an IED and the result thereof, that is something that I hold in great esteem. You've already mentioned the Arrow anti-ballistic, the David Sling, the Iron Dome. All of these that have paid off. I mean, our two militaries come together in missile defense training, including the biannual Juniper Cobra exercise, in which they integrate tactics to counter the growing threat of ballistic missiles and long-range rockets. During the 2012, this drill was combined with Austere Challenge, the largest joint bi-military exercise ever conducted between two allied forces. But you see, our relationship is not just linked by defensive and security operations. We're also engaged in cooperative efforts concerning energy, which is often not talked about. This is why this is so important to me, and important, I believe, to the world. It's not just a one-sided relationship. It is a partnership that we both can benefit from. Both countries realize that the hazards of being too dependent on oil. In 2008, a cooperative agreement was signed between the two countries to produce alternative energy sources. This agreement brought together the U.S. Department of Energy and Israel's Ministry of Energy and Water Resources. The joint venture has generated $20 million in private sector investment in such areas as smart grid management, solar technology, and alternative fuels. The investment in this joint program has yielded greater revenue than congressional investment of $6.3 million. Israeli has matched Congress's appropriation dollar for dollar. It is truly an equal partnership. Bright Source Energy, a company that operates in the U.S. and Israel, is constructing the largest solar thermal energy product using technology developed in Israel. When the solar plant in California's Mojave Desert is operational, it will produce enough electricity to power 140,000 American homes. Recently, a large natural gas field was discovered off Israel's shore. Noble Energy, a Houston-based energy company, has partnered with Israel's energy companies to develop its offshore fields, and these opportunities strengthen the existing bonds and create less oil-dependent U.S. and the world. The U.S.-Israeli economic partnership is one of the most unique for the U.S. Our first free trade agreement with the nation of Israel in 1985. And in the past quarter century, U.S. and Israel trade has grown by 500% and exceeds 78 million daily. More Israeli companies are traded on the NASDAQ than any country outside the United States or China. U.S. firms such as Intel, Microsoft, Google, Apple select Israel as one of their top destinations for international research and development. The free market environment in Israel is such that it attracts business seeing potential to invest and grow. But you see, even Berkshire Hathaway invests in Israel. When asked about why Warren Buffett invests in Israel, he answered that the economic spirit of both the U.S. and Israel is what makes it a no-nonsense investment. Investment isn't one-sided. Between 2000 and 2009, Israeli companies have invested more than $50 billion in U.S. Israel is one of the biggest providers of investment in the United States. More than 15 U.S. states maintain offices in Israel. And also in not just economics, not just in military, but in humanitarian aid as well. Assistance was provided by Israel to Hurricanes Katrina and Sandy, and also to the refugees in Rwanda. Israeli established field hospitals, and several doctors and nurses were sent with medical supplies and vaccinations. And Israel's humanitarian groups provided water desalination equipment in Sudan. In all, Israel provided $7 million of humanitarian aid. Haiti received a comprehensive hospital team from Israel, and 18 tons of supplies and medical team were sent to Japan in the aftermath of the 2011 earthquake. A friend in the region, Turkey, received 50 mobile structures and 80 housing structures to aid the victims of its 2011 earthquake. When you look at this kind of cooperation, when you look at this kind of partnership, it's still hard for me to believe that we're here talking tonight about an agreement that has the potential for such great harm to not only ourselves, but to such a good ally and a partner. With that, I yield back to the gentleman.
Thank you. And as we wrap up, let me just again express my sincerest gratitude for allowing me to participate this evening with you to talk about, well, really to talk about two critically important issues. Our unbreakable special relationship with the free, independent Jewish state of Israel, and our necessary commitment to ensure that Iran never, ever is allowed to get a nuclear weapon capability. These two things come together at this moment in a crucial way. And I'm reminded as we close of a famous saying by Rabbi Hillel, an ancient scholar. Because as you touched on, the United States and Israel share more than just a security arrangement. They share more than technology, even though a lot of the companies you mentioned, Apple, Intel, Google, have more research dollars invested in Israel than any other country outside the United States. Both countries, I'm proud to say our United States and Israel, have a sense of an obligation to give back to the rest of the world, to lean in, to make a difference in people's lives. You talked about Haiti, and one of the stories I've always loved is one of the first relief ships to make it to Haiti was an Israel field hospital. And there's a story about a woman who was giving birth shortly after the earthquake. And she named her child Israel in honor of the doctors who flew in from Tel Aviv immediately after the earthquake, because they understand the need for emergency care in emergency times. But they were joined there by efforts of our own soldiers, United States soldiers, who understood in our own hemisphere, but also around the world, the need to give help, to lend a hand when people are in need. And we see the same thing in the Philippines after the tragic typhoon. You saw American ships coming from nearby, and you saw Israelis and Americans coming from far away. Those are the types of things that unite us. But as Rabbi Hillel said, if I'm not for myself, who will be? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? But the third line in his saying, I think is crucial at this moment as we look to Iran. If not now, when? We need to make sure that the United States, the P5+1, and our regional allies can come together and guarantee that Iran does not become a nuclear-capable country. We need to make sure that the regional security is maintained and the nuclear weapon is prevented. That's our role. That's how history will judge us, and that's why we're here talking tonight. So again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for the work we've done together. It is a privilege to work with you, and I look forward to working together on other issues, including this. And with that, I yield back.
Well, I appreciate my friend for for being here tonight. You have added so much to this debate tonight, but also to your time here in standing up for what we both feel is a very important role in the American-Israeli relationship. You see, Mr. Speaker, I believe Israel is an ally well worth protecting. We recognize and understand the serious threat posed to Israel, both from nation-states such as Iran and as well as radical Islamic terrorist groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda. U.S.-Israel cooperation helps ensure that Israel will remain a shining example of what democratic ideals and a freedom-loving society can achieve. I agree with my friend. Iran cannot be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. That is not a negotiating point. That is just a fact. And when we understand that, I will support real solutions with real triggers, with real timelines to dismantling a program that has not been based on a freedom-loving people just wanting an energy source, but has been based on deception, has been based on deceit, and has been based on an underlying hatred of the West and especially of Israel. We cannot let that happen, and I pray that this administration and the others who have joined in this agreement do not fall victim to a pretty PR campaign. When we understand that, Israel has been a beacon of liberty despite the reigns of despots all around them. Israel has never allowed a threat of attack to shake their recognition that the best way to thwart extremist ideals is to stay free. And now is the time for America to renew its commitment to Israel. God bless this union in the United States. I thank the gentleman from Illinois, my friend, for being here and for the work that we have done together. And I do look forward to the QME bill coming to this floor and passed to the Senate and seeing the President sign it as a good faith effort to show that his commitment is there for Israel as well. And I look forward to that day being with you as that happens. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Horsford, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Minority Leader.